The purpose of this screencast is to talk about writing a buyer's introduction. So it says here for Connections 3.7, but in fact this is the structure that you can use for every essay that we're going to write this year. Now, first thing I'm going to talk about is the purpose of this lesson. And it's the purpose is to learn how to use an introduction structure that can be used in any academic essay, in any subject, at any level, from year 9 to postgraduate. Effectively, this essay structure is a brilliant one to use for essay writing, not just in English, but in any subject. And in fact, I got all the information for this from a lecturer at the University of Victoria University, and he had written this for students at uni at any level, and particularly for students in the commerce area who are notoriously terrible writers. Hate to say it. But as we go through this, we're going to have a look at how to use a particular structure to formulate your essay. Firstly, we're going to have a look at what an introduction is. An introduction is the face of your essay. Effectively, what it does is it introduces your essay. So it gives us an opportunity to look at the essay, see what it's about, and decide whether we like it right from the beginning. And we do this with people's faces all the time. I know that we're not supposed to, but every time you look at someone, you make judgments based on their face. Do they have, I don't know, a whole variety of different things that we can use to make assessments on people. Now, essays do exactly the same thing. They let us sit in a situation where we can make assessments of people right from the start. So, your introduction needs to be good. It needs to create a good impression. In the same way as you dress up in your best outfit for an interview, you need to dress up your best writing for your introduction. So what is it? It's also a place to introduce your text. It's really important that you introduce the text that you're talking about and make it clear that you are talking about a particular thing. This really helps your reader. Think about your introduction as a place to help your reader to understand what you're talking about and to make life easy for them. Your reader is lazy. They don't really want to read your essay a lot of the time. And the reality is that if you can tell them exactly what you're doing, it makes it a lot easier to mark. Now, in your introduction, you also need a roadmap of where you're going. That links back to the place to introduce your text. Your roadmap to where you're going gives us a really clear indication of where you're heading in your essay. So, as a roadmap, it tells you exactly where you go and it has signposts along the way to make it really clear where you're headed. Finally, in your introduction, it's a chance to capture your reader's attention. This comes back to the face of your essay. It comes back to that idea that once you read it, your reader's going to be, once you've written it, your reader's going to either be engaged or disengaged. They're either going to be confident they know what you're talking about, or they're going to be confused. Obviously, we want your reader to be confident that they know what we're talking about, no confusion, clear and ready to go. So, bias. What is a bias, and why do we use the acronym BIAS? So for a start, a bias is a particular point of view that is a prejudice towards one viewpoint. Now, prejudice obviously means that it has an angle that goes in one direction or a desire to kind of like connect to one particular thing. We hear about bias mostly in sports. The referee has a bias towards a particular team, but it can happen in any kind of argument. So, why is that useful for essay writing? Well, your chance here is to develop your bias. You develop an argument. You're telling your reader where it is that you're heading and what your argument is right from the start so that they know what you're talking about. In this case, bias is an acronym. So each of the letters stands for something. And each of those letters is going to help you write an introduction which develops a very clear point of view. So what does bias stand for? Well, firstly, it stands for a big opening sentence. That's your B. The I stands for information about the text. A is your argument, or in other words, the thesis. And S is your summary. So it really clearly summarizes where you're heading. I'm going to go through in detail what each of those things mean. So we're going to start with the big opening sentence. In this case, the big opening sentence is a sentence which sets out to grab your reader's attention. What that means is right from the beginning, you want to grip the reader and you want to make them engaged and enthusiastic about your essay. You want them involved. Most of the time, your marker will be reading a whole series of different essays, and all of them have a particular formula and a particular idea, and they're not particularly inventive. If you really want to grab your reader's attention from the start, that first sentence can be a really powerful way for a reader to go, "Wow, okay, interesting. There's something we're talking about here." So, it could be anything, but the following techniques work really well. A statement about human nature. This is my personal favorite one. English markers love talking about human nature. And in fact, human nature relates to any subject. It relates to mathematics, science, commerce, anything. Your statement about human nature here effectively goes, okay, what I'm saying is that all humans think about this in some way or another. Now, your big opening sentence doesn't need to actually be about your text straightforward. It could also be a rhetorical question or an interrogative. Effectively, what both of those things mean that you're asking a question of your reader. So an interrogative is just a fancy word for rhetorical question, or it's a slightly more detailed word for rhetorical question, and it asks your reader to think about what you're talking about right from the start. And that can be a good way to get them thinking. It could also be a fact or statistics. Facts and statistics have a lot of power in them. If you put out an interesting fact or a statistic that might grab the attention of your reader, something they didn't know, that can be a good way to get their attention. And it can be a bold or outrageous claim, within reason. You don't want to go and make some kind of claim that's going to put your reader off side right from the start, but a bold first sentence is a really nice way to get your reader going, okay, I'm interested. Now, this is the important thing. It should loosely connect to your essay topic, but it should not start to develop your argument yet. What that means is that when you're looking at your essay, if your essay is about a connection that's got something to do with poetry, you could say something along the lines of poetry is a way to communicate the ideas of humanity in a simple, easy to access way. Effectively, what we're saying is that it's about poetry, but it's not about the specific poems or about the particular arguments that you're making. Your information about the text is obviously exactly what it sounds like, the nuts and bolts of the text that you intend to write about. And you need to include the following things. Firstly, the name of the text or texts. So you're going to include, for exam writing, the name of the one or two texts that you're writing about. For connections, you're going to name all 4 texts. You're also going to include the names of the authors or directors, important information for the reader to note. In many cases, there are texts that have been written that have the same name, but they're by a different author. So I don't want you to be writing about salt when you're talking about the Maurice G book, if you're talking about Salt, the long-winded search for human reality by some author whose name I've forgotten. But you get the point. The text title is the same, Salt, the director is different. You also need to have a brief outline of the content of the text, and that's brief. It's one sentence. So it's not a full plot summary, but it's a brief outline of what the main point of your text is. The third part of the bias is your argument. Now, this is your thesis statement, the central point of your essay. It should outline exactly what it is that you intend to prove. And obviously the point here is that you want your reader to know what they are looking for, to know what you are trying to prove. Because in an essay, you're trying to prove something. So it should have a bias. It should be clear. And it should act as a roadmap or signpost. That means that right from the start, your argument tells you or your reader the direction you're moving in. They should be able to understand it, and it should include these signposts. So it should clearly signpost the ideas. Now, the word signpost is going to become really important at exam time, and we'll talk about how to use signposting in essay writing at that stage. But in your connections, effectively what it's saying is my essay is going to do the following thing, and it's going to do it by doing these things. Finally is your summary. Now, in your summary, it summarizes the points you're going to discuss in your essay. So what it will do, it will indicate how your argument will be developed. So what it's going to say is that this is my argument. I will prove my argument by doing this. The I will prove my argument by doing this part is the summary. What it will do is outline what's going to be in each of your body paragraphs. So it clearly suggests each of your body paragraphs will do this. Now, for connections, if you're talking about sub-connections, it's going to say, I have 3 sub-connections. These are my 3 sub-connections. Here's a brief overview of what each sub-connection will do. Well, the note here suggests that writing the summary after your essay can be a really good idea, and it is. What it means is that you have the chance, you might write your summary at the start, and then write your sub-connections and realize that you've changed your ideas a little bit. At that point in time, you go back to your introduction and adjust and change the things that you've written about. The final comments that I have about this the bias essay structure is that writing your introduction last is often a good idea. It can be really sensible to write that introduction after you've written everything else. That said, I usually write mine first, and then I revise it after I've finished my essay. So what that means is that I'll write mine, I'll write my essay, and then I'll go back and go, actually, some of the things that I've written in my essay don't match my introduction, so I need to change my introduction. And this can actually go back to your thesis statement too. You can change your thesis statement later if you have changed your opinion throughout. It's perfectly fine. The clearer your introduction, the better. Remember, your reader is lazy. They want it to be as simple, straightforward, and easy to understand as possible, so make it easy for them. That's it for my bias essay introduction. This is something you're going to use in every essay this year. So learn it, memorize it, and make use of it.